Welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders. We are so thankful that you joined us. And please remember to subscribe here on our YouTube channel or follow and like us on your favorite social media outlet, which you can find links to in our show notes for even more fair housing news and insights. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fair Housing Insiders, episode 105. I'm your host, Jonathan Sarr, and we are joined today by fair housing attorney and president of the Fair Housing Institute, Kathy Williams. Today, we are focusing on the Housing Choice Voucher Program and all the various companies and housing authorities that are involved with these programs. As a growing number of states are adopting source of income as a protected category, more and more landlords and housing providers are becoming involved in these important but very complicated programs. So even if you're here right now, you're not involved in housing choice vouchers, you may be required to accept them soon. So this education is really for everybody. And if this is your first time with us, you searched and found out about this show or this particular episode, please like and subscribe. We want to make sure that we give you content that's going to help you with your career. And that's what this show is all about. We're also very excited to announce to our audience that we have released a specialized fair housing course for housing authority employees working with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So there'll be a link in the show notes for this course, so please take a minute to check it out. So again, welcome, Kathy. We're grateful to do a bit of a deep dive into this housing sector and this particular program. So our first question for you, are there specific fair housing requirements for the HCVP?
Absolutely. The Housing Choice Voucher Program, and we're going to kind of alternate back and forth between calling it that and HCVP today, involves many additional requirements not applicable to other types of housing due to the many HUD regulations that apply to the HCVP. It is critical that housing authority employees and landlords and companies that accept Section 8 housing choice vouchers know what these program regulations are and how they interact with both the Fair Housing Act and Section 504 and other HUD programs such as the Violence Against Women Act.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Is there an example you can share with our audience of these types of interactions?
Well, one of the best examples of the most important and unique relationship between the HCVP regulations and the Fair Housing and Section 504 regulations is shown at the scenario you're going to see in this video. With every Section 8 voucher, there's the housing authority who issues the voucher, there's the landlord who provides the housing unit, and there's the participant who is granted the voucher and then locates the housing unit. What you're going to see in this scenario is a participant who is struggling because she has a mobility limitation and the housing unit is just not accessible enough for her to be able to continually live there comfortably. So we need to go through the various legal requirements and how they apply to this situation.
Thank you, Kathy, for that. So let's take a look at a scenario that will really help sets the stage for the rest of our discussion today, and we'll get your comments and feedback on it.
Hey, Linda, this apartment is not working out for me. When I moved into this place, I was able to walk part of the time. Now I must use my wheelchair all the time. I have to get out of my wheelchair to enter the bathroom because the doorway just isn't wide enough. I also need the landlord to take out the cabinets underneath the sinks in the kitchen and bathrooms so I can sit in my wheelchair while I use the sinks. I've asked the landlord to make these changes, but he says he won't do it. Can you force him to so I can continue to live here?
I'm sorry you're having these difficulties in your apartment. Remember that the Housing Choice Program gives you the ability to choose your apartment. It sounds like you made a mistake when you decided to live where you are. You should probably wait until your lease is up and then move to a different apartment.
Okay, interesting scenario. So question for you, Kathy. How does this scenario show how these programs relate to each other?
Well, I think one of the best examples of the important and unique relationship between the HCVP regulations and the Fair Housing and Section 504 requirements is shown in this scenario that we just saw. With every Section 8 voucher, there's a housing authority who issues the voucher. There's the landlord who provides the housing unit. And then, of course, there's the participant who is granted the voucher by the housing authority and then goes out to locate the unit and has that and has to establish a relationship or a lease with that landlord. The participant in this scenario that we saw is struggling because she has mobility limitations and the housing unit is just not accessible enough for her to be able to continue to live there comfortably. So let's go through the various legal requirements and see how they would apply to this situation. When we apply only the fair housing requirements, we know that the landlord must permit a disabled resident to make reasonable modifications to the property if needed by that disabled resident. It will be the resident's responsibility under the Fair Housing Act to pay for those modifications to the units. Now, when we also then overlay Section 504 requirements to that, we learn that the property, if it receives federal subsidy, will be required to pay for reasonable modifications. Due to the unique requirements of both Section 504 and the HCVP regulations, however, we learned that landlords who accept Section 8 housing vouchers are not considered subsidized and therefore are not covered by Section 504. The practical ramifications of that is they don't have to pay for modifications. Finally, since the housing authority is ultimately responsible to administer the HCVP and is always covered by Section 504, that means they've got to meet the disability-related needs of their participants. So the housing authority has the ultimate responsibility to take appropriate actions that addresses this participant's needs.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Kathy. So that leads to another question. Yeah, this scenario is really helpful for us to visualize what our audience may be facing on a day-to-day basis. But does that mean the housing authority must pay for modifications in this participant's unit, regardless of what the landlord wants them to do?
Well, the answer to that is no, not necessarily, but that is one option. That is a really good reason why FHI felt we needed specialized education in this area because of all these complicated relationships between the parties involved in the HCVP. There's a variety of possible actions that the housing authority could take to address the participants' disability-related needs while not creating more problems for the private landlords they contract with in this program. So, for instance, The housing authority could pay for the modifications. That's one option. Another option is the housing authority could negotiate with the private landlord to make those modifications. And in return, the housing authority could agree to increase the rent paid under the contract between the housing authority and the landlord. So that would be another option. And yet another option would be the housing authority could permit the participant to terminate her lease with the landlord early and go and find a different unit that is more accessible and meets their needs. So the correct option is going to vary depending on the individual situation and the parties involved. The most important point, the takeaway point, though, is the housing authority is always going to be ultimately responsible to figure out how to take appropriate actions to meet the participants' disability-related needs.
Okay, thank you again. Appreciate that, Kathy. So looking at our scenario, so do you think that Linda, in the scenario, the housing authority employee, handled this situation correctly?
No, she did not. Instead of working to address the participant's needs with that particular unit, she blamed the participant for not choosing the right unit and then refused to take action and said, well, just wait to the end of your lease and then go find a different unit. By refusing to take action, she violated both the HCVP and Section 504.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so I think our audience really gets the point. There's some very detailed information on how these particular programs and fair housing interact with each other. So what are other examples of why specialized fair housing education is needed for employees working with the Housing Choice Voucher program?
Well, when we talk about fair housing and housing authority employees, we've got to say that because housing authorities are almost completely funded and completely regulated by HUD, there's always going to be a heightened sense of making sure that they're always in compliance with both fair housing and Section 504 when they are working with both the landlords and with participants. But this course, the specified course we're talking about, it also talks about fair housing concerns with how applications and admissions are administered, how the program is marketed, the importance of proper management of reasonable accommodation requests that may go either to the landlord or directly to the housing authority, the interactions between inspectors by the housing authority and participants is also an important area to talk about, and the complicated necessity of providing applicants and participants with their VAWA rights. And those requirements apply both to the housing authority and to those private landlords that work with this program. So to cover all of these topics, we decided to create this very extensive course. The good news is that it is targeted to this particular program and will be relevant to both housing authority employees and all of the many, many management companies and private landlords that now work within this course, or I'm sorry, within the HCVP program.
Yeah, within the program. Yeah, very good. Yep. Lots there. It's an excellent course. So make sure you check it out in the show notes. It's available now. You can get more information about that course. And the Fair Housing Institute is so grateful to be able to provide not only this show, but even more importantly, a very extensive course catalog. So a variety of topics. So if you haven't checked it out, feel free to do that. That link is in the show notes as well. So Kathy, This was a deep topic and a lot to really help digest and break down and understand how these different programs relate to each other. So thank you for being on the show again, as always. So thank you to our community. This is episode 105 of the Fair Housing Insiders. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to our community. We look forward to next time. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to hear your feedback about today's episode. Do you have a topic that you would like to see discussed in a future episode? Feel free to share that with us. In the show notes, you'll see a link to sign up for our newsletter. This newsletter will keep you up to date with our latest episodes, blogs, and information about our online fair housing courses. Thank you again, and happy training.